That was Mark Simpkin reporting. We're joined now by the Shadow Finance Minister, Andrew Robb. Andrew Robb, welcome to ABC News 24.
Thanks, Linda.
Even if you don't agree with the measures the government's taken in this budget, haven't they shown you the size of the task to get back to surplus?
Well, they've created a huge task for us to get back to surplus. It's really a sea of red ink that they presented, and a very disappointing budget. But I think the most disappointing thing really was the sort of fundamental dishonesty that characterised this budget again.
And in what ways?
Well, it misrepresents in so many ways elements of the future and the past, for that matter. I mean, it bases two surpluses, so-called, on assumptions which, again, are unrealistic. It's what they've done time and time and time again, is forecast overestimates of revenue, consistently overestimate of revenue. They spend the money and then they woe is me when the money doesn't turn up.
So you believe that the revenue the government will get in over time, whether it's a Labor government or a coalition government, will be substantially less. So you in fact think you will face a worse position?
We will. We will indeed, because, and again, in regard to the calculations of the MRRT, the mining tax, again, there's $200 million this year. In the so-called surplus year, they claim they'll get $2.2 billion. There are no assumptions that you could sensibly develop that would give you that outcome. So on so many fronts, the problem is in fact worse than what they've painted tonight.
So if you get into government on September the 14th, when the election is, will you cut harder than this government's cut?
We're going to have to take some very difficult decisions.
And are cuts like the baby bonus the sort of cuts that you would have to implement?
Well, we will make an assessment and we will give a sense to people of what decisions we take, the areas, once we get a true handle on the budget. See, tonight we thought we would come away with some reasonable understanding of the state of the nation's books. The trouble is we're going to have to wait again till PFO, the pre-election financial forecast by Treasury and Finance, to hopefully get a real keen sense, an accurate sense of what the future holds.
What if the forecasts in PFO, the pre-election outlook, are similar to the ones tonight?
Well,
will they be misleading?
I can't believe, that's a hypothetical. My assumption is that Finance and Treasury will not engage in what is clearly the sorts of fiddles that we've seen take place in this budget to create the prospect of future surpluses. Then, the 10-year plans for spending. I mean, how meaningless are these things? There's even a 15-year program to do with venture capital. I mean, this is 5 elections away.
The opposition called for the government to show how disability care and the education reforms would be fully funded. The government says it's done that over 10 years. No,
well, they've failed. I mean, this in no way presents a clear strategy as to how they will fund those two fundamental and very expensive programs, much less any sort of coherent strategy to the document. This was a bizarre experience. I've been many times in these lockups over the years, and I don't think I've seen a set of budget papers that are so disorganised, so lacking in detail in many respects. You've got the feeling they were thrown together at the last minute, and there is no coherent strategy. What is there in there for business to give them the encouragement or to get an appetite for risk and investment again, to remove the uncertainty? All it has done is fuel uncertainty in the community again, and this is not a good thing for the country.
You and Joe Hockey have said that retaining the AAA credit rating and getting back to surplus is paramount.
Yes.
Are you prepared ahead of election day to jettison or put off promises, things that you have committed to before now, in order to make room to get back to surplus?
Well, what I'm saying to you is that it is a huge task that we've got in front of us. We will have to take lots of difficult decisions. We've already identified lots of savings, which we will table in due course. So we will have to put those on the table before the election so people can make a judgment.
But if a surplus is paramount, doesn't that mean that's your main goal and other things will have to wait?
Well, firstly, we've got to get to surplus in a sustainable way and then start to slowly wind back that debt so that we can give confidence to the rating agencies and to the foreign investors. At the moment, we're seeing deficits as far as the eye can see under this government. We're seeing a growth of debt which is going to break through the $300 billion ceiling sometime during the course of the forward estimates. There is nothing which gives anybody any hope, and certainly, you know, somebody has to get it in there and get in control of the nation's finances.
Does that mean then you go to the election, I'll ask again, with a much smaller list of spending promises than the ones you've already made, than the ones you made at the last election?
This is not going to be an election where there's an auction. But we will detail our cuts. We will detail the sensible spending measures that we need to take in order to, you know, get back to a credible pathway. This is the trouble. There's no credibility in this document that we've seen tonight. They've got a pathway, but it's not credible. It's not believable. And we have to firstly be honest with people, establish sensible and realistic assumptions on revenue and spending. You know, all of the spin we've heard tonight, you know, this budget shows that revenue this year is $80 billion greater than the last year of the Howard government. But in the same document, spending this year is $120 billion more than the last year of the Howard government. That tells you everything. This government's got a spending problem, not a revenue problem.
You say you won't outline the full details of your spending and saving promises until after the pre-election outlook is released, about 10 days into the election campaign. These days, more and more people are doing pre-poll and postal votes before election day. Would you encourage them not to vote until after they have seen your promises, which could be 3 weeks into the campaign, couldn't it?
Well, people will need to make decisions, but we don't get access to those numbers until 10 days into the campaign, and people will need to make a judgment based on the program that we lay out shortly after. But we got to do the responsible thing. We've got to take a measured approach. We've got to look at the real numbers and make, you know, adult decisions about the way to run this country.
Andrew, Robb, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Lyndal.
And following the budget, Joe Hockey also has been out and about giving interviews. Here's a little of what he told